say average salespeople, the bottom 80%, they start talking about their product from the get-go. Hi, how are you? Let me tell you what I've got. Even before they even know if this person is a prospect. So therefore, the slower you go at the beginning and the more careful you are about clearly identifying the prospect's need, the better you are when you begin to present. Which brings us to the next 20%. And the next 20% is presenting. But in presenting, it's very simple. What you do is you simply match the customer's needs to your product or service. Very much like gears. You know, if you shift gears and the gears mesh, they're soundless. But if the gears clash, it makes a lot of noise. When you match your selling process to the customer's buying process, the meshing is perfect, like hands in a glove. So you find that you don't try to sell your product, you just show your customer that based on what he or she has said, your product or service is the ideal thing, all things considered. And here's a rule in selling. People don't argue with their own data. People don't argue with their own information. If you say it's good, that's you saying it. But if I say this is what I wanted, and you point out that your product will do that for me, how can I argue? So the best salespeople feed it back and say, based on what you said, you're concerned about this, well, our product will do that. And you wanted this, well, this product has what you wanted. And you had this problem before, well, this product is designed to avoid that problem. People don't argue with their own data. So the very best sales presentation is where you match carefully what the customer has said to what you offer. And the customer can't argue. The sale then goes together smoothly. Well, the last part, the last 10% of the new model is confirming or closing the sale. Does this make sense to you? Do you like this? Is this what you had in mind? Is this what you were looking for? Is this better than what you're doing now? The closing is very gentle and very professional if you've done the first parts properly. You don't have to use arm wrestling techniques to get the person to make a decision, because the decision is obvious because you've matched the needs so well. The sale is actually made in the presentation. The presentation is the critical part where you simply show the customer that based on what they want and need, based on their problems or situation, what you're offering is the best thing, all things considered, at this time. It may not be the best thing in the whole world, but all things considered, at this time, it's the best choice. Rule number 6 is that listening builds trust. Listening builds trust. Now, if you only remember one thing from today, remember this rule, because this rule will make you popular, it'll make you happy, it'll make you successful, and it'll ultimately make you rich. Leaders, in one of the best management studies done out of Harvard recently, they say leaders are excellent listeners. Leaders are not people who talk and give orders and tell this. Leaders go around and ask a lot of questions. And as a result, they get a lot of very good information and a good understanding of the decisions that need to be made. Leaders are great listeners. Top salespeople are superb listeners. So listening builds trust. So one-to-one relationship between asking questions and getting a chance to listen and building trust, and trust is what leads to the sale. So we say here that, listening skills are the keys to sales success. Listening skills are the keys to sales success. And there's 4 basic listening skills. If you have read all the articles and taken all the courses and listened to all the audios and watched all the videos, there's 4 keys to listening. If you read all the articles in Cosmopolitan and Vogue and People and all that, and all the questionnaires and everything else, and all the articles telling what he wants, what she wants, and so on, it comes down to 4 basic listening skills. First listening skill is listen attentively. Listen attentively. Listen without interruptions. Listen very closely. What we have found, there's an interesting book, sold 1 million copies, called His Needs, Her Needs. And it's about the needs between men and women. And what are the primary needs that men and women have? Well, the primary need that a woman has is to be paid attention to. She wants affection, but affection is expressed in paying attention. The flip side is that there's nothing that makes a woman angrier or more frustrated than to be ignored. And so in dealing with members of the opposite persuasion, the very best thing you can do is express affection and listen attentively. In dealing with customers, listen attentively. Listen without interruptions. Lean forward and hang on every word with no attempt to interrupt. Imagine that your eyes are sun lamps and you want to give your customer's face a tan. And just listen attentively. Just listen attentively. Lean forward. Listen. Nod. Smile. Be what is called an active listener. Not an impassive listener, but an active listener. Not face the customer directly. If you're standing, lean forward on the balls of your feet, which moves all of your energy, your psychological energy forward. If you're sitting, lean forward physically like you're leaning into the person and listen intently. What we have found is that people who are listened to intently, their blood pressure goes up, their heart rate goes up, their galvanic skin response goes up, but what is most important is their self-esteem goes up. A person who is very closely listened to by a professional like yourself likes themselves more. They feel more valuable and they feel more important. They feel respected. They feel that what they're saying is of value. And so when you hang on every word, you have what Les Giblin, a communications expert, calls, you have what is called white magic. White magic is the magic of just listening intently to another person. It's the most powerful of all sales techniques. Every year, the Purchasing Managers Association of America, for whom I've spoken, does a study, and these are people who work for Fortune 1000 companies and larger, and all they do is buy stuff. They have the purchasing agent's office downstairs. Everything the company needs worldwide is sent there, and they just meet salespeople all day long. Salespeople just line up like in a busy dentist's office. They just line up and come in and give their presentations all day long. And so at the end of every year, they ask these people, what do you like most about salespeople? What do you like least? Well, what do you think that they like most about salespeople? Is they ask really good questions and they listen closely to understand my true needs. This is what the sales managers, the most active purchasers in America, like the most about salespeople. What do you think they like the least? They just come in here and talk nonstop and try to sell me their stuff without taking any time to find out what it is I really need. And so that's what they like the most, and what they like the least is attentive listening. Now, number 2 is pause before replying, or B, I'm sorry, pause before replying. Pause before replying. Pause 3 to 5 seconds. Now, in pausing, you have 3 advantages. Very often, you've been in a conversation where a person says 1, 2, 3, the other person says 4, 6, A, B, C, D, F, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Is the person listening if they respond immediately? But if you say something, or the customer says something, and you pause, and you reflect on it, and you think about it, before you respond, you're telling the customer 3 things. First of all, what you're saying is really important, so I have to think about it before I answer, which compliments the prospect, raises their self-esteem, and it builds your credibility. The second thing is you avoid the risk of interrupting the prospect if he's just reorganizing his thoughts. But third of all, and this is very important for the rest of your life, if you pause, the words of the prospect actually soak in and you understand what he or she has just said at a deeper level of mind. You actually understand them better because you have let the words soak in. Whereas if you respond immediately, the words don't get a chance to soak in. So when somebody says something, pause. We say at home, if your spouse says something to you, pause, and just in that few seconds of pausing, you'll actually hear what they said. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? It's very powerful. So pausing has all benefits and no detriments. Number C is question for clarification. Question for clarification. And here is the basic rule, is the person who asks questions has control. The person who asks questions has control. And the very best question you could ask in selling is this. It is, how do you mean? How do you mean? A friend of mine was selling our seminar in New York recently, and he was talking to a prospective customer, and the fellow said, well, what have you learned from Brian Tracy's programs that's worthwhile applying? He said, how do you mean? He said, well, I mean, why would somebody go to a Brian Tracy program? He said, how do you mean exactly? And he just said, how do you mean? And the person said, well, how do you mean? And he just said this several times, and he said, I'm not answering. He said, yes, I am. I am answering you. I learned the question, how do you mean? How do you mean is the most powerful questions of all, because the person who asks, how do you mean, first of all, the person being asked will expand on their previous answer. I can't afford it. Well, how do you mean? Well, we just exhausted all of our funds. Well, how do you mean exactly? Well, we won't have the funds until the next quarter. Aha, so if we could put the billing into the next quarter, then we could make it work. Well, yes, absolutely, I hadn't thought about that. Each time you ask, how do you mean, you get deeper and deeper into the answer. Also, when you ask the question, how do you mean, and listen intently, you get a chance to build trust, because the person who asks questions builds trust. So asking how do you mean it also enables you to take control of the sales conversation. D is feed it back, paraphrase it in your own words. This is called the acid test of listening. This is where you prove that you really were listening. This is where you prove that you weren't like one of those little dogs on the back of a car. You feed it back in your own words. So let me understand what you're saying. What you're concerned about is this, and what you want to accomplish is that, but what you had last time was this, and what you want next time is that. In other words, you feed back what they've said until they say, yes, that's it. That's my situation. When you do that, your credibility goes straight through the roof. It means that you were genuinely listening, you genuinely care, and you are genuinely trustworthy. So only then do you say, well, I think what we have is exactly the right thing for you, or I think we have something for you that will exactly be the right thing. But you only begin selling when you fed back what they have said accurately in your own words. And finally, number 8, we say that the key differentiator in selling, I mentioned this before, is the quality of the trust bond between you and the prospect. The quality of the trust bond is how high is the trust bond between you and the prospect. The rule is that if a customer really, really likes you, the details will not get in the way of buying from you. If the customer is not sure, if the credibility is at issue, the details will trip you up every step of the way. They'll argue over the details, and they'll argue over the price, and they'll argue over the differences between you and your competition. But if they like you, they'll find a reason to buy from you. So the trust bond is the critical factor. And the rule is that listening builds trust.